Okay, now I'm going to talk about health a little bit, and I'm going to kind of tie fear into this idea of health that we have today. So, how would we define a healthy person? Well, maybe you would look at their biomarkers, right? If their blood work is good, if their blood work is optimal, we would say they're healthy, right? Or maybe we'll look at their physical fitness, and if they are, well, if they're physically fit, we would say they are healthy, perhaps. Or maybe we look at their mental state. So if they are of sound mind, they're healthy. But beyond that, we could even look at their behaviors. Okay, so typically people who are physically or mentally unhealthy, they would exhibit behaviors that are abnormal, right? And if they are mentally healthy and physically healthy, they're probably going to exhibit behaviors that are normal. So if we came up with a an example of somebody exhibiting unhealthy behaviors, what would that look like? Well, maybe it's somebody who is, I don't know, maybe they're depressed, right? And they're not contributing value to the economy, right? And this is definitely abnormal according to our definition of normal. And by extension, it's unhealthy, right? This depressed person is mentally unwell. Now, here's the problem, okay? Who do we blame for this depression? Well, usually we look at the individual and we treat the individual, right? So we're treating the individual maybe for some kind of chemical imbalance, a serotonin deficiency or something like that, or a dopamine deficiency, or maybe it's just poor nutrition, maybe lack of exercise, something like that. But what we're not doing is we're not looking at the wider picture, the broader picture of the environment that the individual exists in. And there's there's a nature versus nurture argument to have here. Okay, so it's not to say that we are 100% products of our environment. Perhaps there's some nature aspect, some genetic aspect here, but with the field of epigenetics, we are even kind of slowly eating away at the nature aspect. We are learning more and more that we are products of our environment. And if we never address the environmental catalysts that are ultimately causing the depression, then what's going to happen? Well, we're going to continue to treat people with depression meds, and then we're going to fail to realize the broader pattern that is ultimately more depressed people. We are seeing an increase in depression, and we're not addressing the catalyst. We're just treating individuals individually, right? This is a problem, okay? And this is something that Gabor Mate speaks a lot about. He wrote a book. I don't know exactly what the title is. I didn't read it, but he speaks a lot about this on various podcasts and whatnot, where we love to put blame on the individual, but we completely ignore the broader environmental catalyst, the broader social structure of society that is ultimately probably more responsible for what we're seeing than individuals themselves. And again, the logical conclusion of ignoring the environmental catalysts is that we're going to have out of depression, and it's going to be out of control because we're treating symptoms when we're not fixing the catalysts. So it's kind of this dichotomy between treatment and cures, right? You can't cure something by treating it. You cure things by addressing the root cause, right? So I'm going to introduce anxiety and fear, right? So anxiety is basically a fear of some future event, right? So we have a lot of anxiety today, a lot of fear. And we treat this chronic anxiety with, what again? We treat it with anti anxiety meds, right? And I think that's mostly contributed to a serotonin imbalance. Now, again, what's the problem with treating anxiety with serotonin or with a anti anxiety med? Well, again, we're treating individuals. We're not treating the source of the problem. Now, I'm going to make a comparison here, a parallel between your average, I don't know, you're not average, I can say, but to your teenager. Take a teenager who has chronic anxiety and they're on meds, okay? And let's compare this teenager to a politician who is in a position to send troops to war. Okay, so this politician votes whether or not we declare war with another nation, and this teenager, he or she just has chronic anxiety, and we're treating that chronic anxiety with meds again. Say we stop treating that teenager with chronic anxiety. What happens to that teenager? Well, maybe they get suicidal. Maybe they get violent. Maybe they become the person who commits the school shooting. And I'm not trying to be I'm not trying to put blame on teenagers for this or anything as a broad category. I'm not trying to generalize, but what's the difference between that teenager responding to their anxiety by shooting up a school and a politician responding to their fear of some other nation by sending people to war? What is the fundamental difference between those two things? There's not a difference, okay? The only difference is scale. This is a pattern. There's a parallel between these two people, and the parallel is the underlying anxiety. The parallel is the fear. We basically have a bunch of people with chronic anxiety, chronic fear disorders controlling the military, okay? And what this leads to, what it has led to, is a military industrial complex, right? We have people profiting from this chronic fear that turns into war, that turns into vicious cycles of war. So it's like father, like son. If the politicians and the government who are exhibiting this violent behavior outwards, why wouldn't the children do it? It's like, again, it's like father, like son. We are exhibiting patterns throughout society, and we justify the war, but we don't justify the school shootings. We shouldn't justify any of it. Instead, we don't make these connections, and we don't realize that the entire society is sick with an anxiety disorder, with a fear disorder, a chronic fear disorder. And the truth is, it's not just like the United States, it's humanity as a whole. We are all basically under this spell of fear. Fear is a disease. It spreads like any other disease does. And the truth is, it kills more people than any other disease does, with the exception of maybe, I don't know, malaria or something, right? The humans are our own worst enemy. And it's because we aren't getting a hold of our fears. Instead, we justify violence in response to fear on this high level at the government level, but we don't justify it at the lower level. Again, we shouldn't justify it anywhere. If you look at the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, if you compare both sides of this conflict, the truth is that Hamas and the IDF, they are just people with chronic anxiety, chronic fear disorders that are in this vicious cycle of attacking each other in order to ease their fears of their opposition. But that doesn't work. We know it doesn't work. They've been Islam and Judaism have been, and Christianity for that matter, these groups have been at war with each other for centuries, and it hasn't ended. It's because it's a vicious cycle. It's not going to end by fighting more. Violence is going to make the problem continue into the future. So the solution is obvious. You have to realize that you're a victim of your fears. And this goes for the IDF, Hamas, but as well as the innocent civilians of Israel and Palestine and Gaza and whatnot. We can't keep allowing these people to exercise violence in response to their anxiety disorder, their fear disorder, while telling innocent while not justifying violence at a lower level. Again, if you have violence at the higher level, it's going to feed into the lower level. It's just how it works. And we justify the governments that do things because the governments have power, because the governments keep us under this spell that they know better than the average innocent civilian. The truth is that there probably are some psychopaths at this government level who are profiting from the wars, right? Well, we know there's people profiting from the wars, but there's probably some psychopaths who are not purely fearful and are not creating these violent wars just in response to fear. But most of them, I don't think, are psychopaths. I think most of them are just people who fear their opposition, and in doing so, they attack them. They say that offense is the best defense. That's just a farce. That is how you fool yourself into endless cycles of war. And if you happen to be the powerful nation, the person in power, or the part of the group of people in power who can convince people of that, you're just propagating fear. And that the line between the psychopath and the person with the chronic fear disorder is ultimately how much you are propagating fear. And the thing is I don't really think that the psychopaths, I don't really think that they are entirely free from this chronic anxiety disorder either. I think they are victims of it as well. And that's ultimately what we have to realize. We have to realize that we are victims of this disease that is fear. And if we don't realize that, we are going to continue to be victims to that disease. The thing about fear is that it's not like COVID. It doesn't spread inevitably. I think we can stop it if we become conscious, if we realize that attacking, it's the solution to COVID is what? Complete isolation? I mean, that didn't work, we know that, but the solution to stopping the spread of any traditional disease is isolation, right? The solution to, and again, that isolation doesn't really work that well because isolation kills plenty as it is, but the solution to this fear disease is the opposite of isolation. It's unity. And it's that simple. It's like all of these religions that are constantly at war with each other. It's like their God had one message, and it was the message of unity. It was a message of collectivism. And yet all of these religions are trying to claim this land. Like, that's not what your God wanted. And I say this as I wouldn't even say an atheist, I would say an omnist. I kind of believe that all religions have merits, but if you interpret them wrong, or if you use them to justify control over other people, again, that control is going to lead to fear. That fear is going to lead to war. We need to dissolve this disease of fear, and we do it by becoming conscious of what's happening to our psyches. Again, Gabor Mate speaks in length about this, and I think listen to him. He's very eloquent, a lot more eloquent than me. He's a very intelligent man, and he can kind of dissolve these societal expectations and these societal structures that we've built, and in effect, we're going to create a new normal. That's what we have to do. The normal we have now, and I think that's the title of one of Gabor Mate's books is, I think, The New Normal or something like that. The bottom line is we've created a normal state of existence that is bound to chronic anxiety. And that chronic anxiety leads us into chronic war. And unless you want to sit there and live in fear of being the next innocent victim, the innocent civilian of some war, then you have to get control of yourself. And I'm mainly speaking to innocent civilians, okay? In any nation around the world right now, you have to control the governments who are basically bigger victims of this chronic fear disorder than you are. The people who seek these positions of power, they seek them because they are more fearful than anyone else. And in order to ease that fear, they seek to control. And when you choose violence to control that fear, you create more violence. We need more people who are going to seek those positions of control because they see a peaceful solution to their fear. And that peaceful solution is ultimately, it's peace, right? It is unity. So again, get control of your fears, get control of these negative emotions, and when they come into your heart, your psyche, your brain, whatever it may be, when they come into your body, when you feel fear, try to separate yourself from that feeling. Try to identify it and expel it. I know that's hard. It's hard in the moment, especially if it's violence you're trying to expel. It's the fear of violence. But if there's no violence, if it's just people saying words and you're getting fearful of words, then there's a big problem. What that means is you are a victim of chronic anxiety disorder or whatever it may be, chronic fear disorder. Again, as that comparison I made between the school shooter and the politician sending people to war, there's no difference between those two people. They are just both victims of fear, and they are responding to their fears with violence. We cannot allow this to continue because it's going to be your ass eventually, my ass, whoever it may be. Just in everyday life, just when you feel that fear come over you, if it's not violence that's being directly inflicted on you, you have to get control of it, and you have to encourage peace. You have to bring peace first to your own body, to your own mind, to your own heart, and then you have to expel that peace to other people. You have to spread the mindset that peace is possible rather than violence being the only solution to fear. It's hard to do, and it does take a lot of thinking. It takes a lot of conscious awareness of your emotional state. But if we don't do it, the consequences are dire. So we know that we now have nukes, the nukes to destroy all of human civilization. Let's not get to that point. All we have to do is decide that we don't want to get to that point, and we never will. So again, have to identify fear as if it's a disease, no different than any other disease that has ever been around. Okay, no different than COVID. The only difference is that we have the ability to expel this disease, and it begins with individuals becoming conscious of their emotional state and separating themselves from those negative emotions. And when you do that, you don't have to give up the positive emotions, okay? I promise you, you do not. In fact, when you get rid of those negative emotions, you make room for more positive emotions. Might sound crazy, but I speak from experience. Thanks for watching.